And our visuals are good?
They're looking very good.
All right. You just give me the word and we will commence.
You may begin at any time, sir.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Leadership Edge. I am your host, Ted Gorski. The Leadership Edge is a show that focuses on leadership issues that are affecting leaders on a daily basis. We discuss tips and techniques that will help you, the leader or the upcoming leader, to be more effective in your leadership roles. I'm your host, Ted Gorski, and today we're going to be talking and finishing off our whole focus on the theme of trailblazing leadership. Now, in our past shows, we've spent some time on what trailblazing leadership is. We've focused on the first two steps, which we'll get to shortly, the two characteristics of trailblazing leadership. And today we're going to talk about the actual third step, which is allurement. So if you haven't seen the previous two shows in regards to the first two characteristics of the Leadership Edge and of trailblazing leadership, you may want to review those so you get the full encompassing act in regards to what trailblazing leadership is. And I will tell you today, I've been a hell of a trailblazer leader. I could say hell of a, can I, Producer Bill? Absolutely, it's my show, why not? Producer Bill has been harassing me about a calendar, and we've talked about this in previous shows. Now, a little rumor going around here that he's kind of put it in a very prestigious place. And if you remember from a previous show, it wasn't too prestigious in Mr. Ted's eyes. He has told producer Colleen, who is elevated to producer number one, to go and move the calendar. So you can imagine where producer Bill is hiding it. But after this show, I'm going to find out. And I'm going to look for holes in the walls to see where it actually was moved from. So producer Bill, I got you covered. I got your act. I know what you're doing. See, no comment from producer Bill. Notice, silence.
I'm a loser, Ted.
Yes. You know what? But by being with me, you are a winner. And remember that.
Will do, sir.
And that's a great, you know what? You actually did a great leeway into today's show in regards to allurement. And we didn't even script that. This is how great we are on the Leadership Edge. So, let us talk about trailblazing leadership. And let's really go over this so we can get all caught up today. As we've said in previous shows, the whole concept of trailblazing leadership is helping leaders blaze that new trail. Blaze that new trail that's straight ahead, in which they are breaking new ground for them to really create awesome out-of-the-box ideas in which they have to gather people together to help them engage on that particular vision. So we're not looking at the same old solutions. It's about cutting that new path. And with that new path comes new opportunities, new solutions, and of course, some barriers. But trailblazing leaders, by becoming trailblazing leaders, have more fun, are more creative, and end result will make more money. Yes, because you become more valuable. So, what we're talking about here is the three characteristics. Now, in the previous show, we have talked about the whole concept of alignment. And what we're basically talking there is walking the talk and talking the walk. It's making sure that your values and beliefs are aligned to your behaviors, which is very critical in becoming a trailblazing leader. We talked in the last show about the concept of critical thinking and why that's so important. And we're going to talk about critical thinking in an upcoming show when we start talking about looking at the candidates who are running for president and really looking at it from a critical thinking perspective, ciphering out what is fact from fiction. So just putting a primer on you, you don't want to miss that show. And today we're going to talk about the whole concept of allure and having some kind of allurement. So again, number one characteristic is alignment. Number two is critical thinking. So today we're going to focus on the whole concept of allure and what it is and why it's so important. But before I get into the whole characteristics and the concepts of what allure means, I want to throw up a couple of examples that really show and model what we're going to talk about today. in terms of this whole concept of Ellure. And one of the trailblazers that we're going to talk about here is the concept of Ronald Reagan. Now, when we're talking about Ellure, we're really talking about the power of language. What we're talking about is the power and how to really depict a particular vision. It's your ability to articulate that vision to people. And one of the people that really shows this and shown this was President Ronald Reagan. See, he was known as the great communicator. And he had this great ability to really connect with people. He had this ability to make you feel that you can help become and solve any particular issue that was there. He was always there to kind of grab you and engage you into his particular vision. And one of the big things he used to speak on is that shiny, that shiny city on the hill. And he had this ability to really make you feel proud to be an American. He had this ability to reach on both sides of the aisle to really connect with others that no other president has been able to connect with. He is one of the great examples of allurement. His language was quite powerful. And he is somebody that I've always looked at in terms of studied in regards to what made him so special in terms of allurement. The second person that comes to mind is President John F. Kennedy. Now, what's really interesting about him is in one of his favorite speeches, he talked about a couple of things. It's not, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. President Kennedy had the ability to really connect with others at a much higher level. He had that ability to use language to engage people, to engage them into a solution, to engage them into his vision. And one of his most powerful visions and one of his most powerful challenges is when he said in the early 60s that his goal and America's goal should be to bring a person to the moon and back by the end of the 60s, at the end of that particular decade. Now, you have to understand, during that time, that was such a bold goal. So bold that he challenged everybody to be at their best. He challenged everyone to make that goal a reality. He set that vision, and we're going to talk more about this powerful vision pretty later in the show. But he had that ability to really connect with others and to do that. And what we're going to see in terms of characteristics of allurement, in terms of trailblazing leaders, is they have that ability to set that vision. Set that vision that may seem out of your reach, but really help people get pulled into it to really make it a reality. And that's the whole focus that we're going to look at today, is this whole concept of allure. So, what is it? Well, I see it as two things. Engaging and alluring make up this whole concept of Ellure. Now, both of these are vital in order for Ellure to be there. And what we're talking about here is, as a leader, you have to have the ability and skill set to have both. Because what we're talking about, cutting new trails, and we cut trailblazing trails, what we're talking about is something brand new. When President Kennedy made that challenge, there was a whole new territory we'd never been in. He was looking and asking people to step up, build new technologies to make that a reality. And he encouraged and really pushed people to be at their best. So both of these are kind of vital in the communication. So let's break both of these down. When we talk about engaging, what are we talking about? Well, what we're talking about, first of all, is positive language. What you notice from President Kennedy and President Reagan is when they were engaging, they always used language that was quite positive. It was this can-do attitude of what we can do to be successful. And it's empowering language. It's that language that empowers people to be their best. Now, what's quite interesting is when you look at these characteristics, that's what I do as a coach when I am coaching leaders. everything I'm doing is really looking at it from a very positive approach. What we're looking at is what can a person do in a situation? What can they do to achieve a certain result? What can they do to look at potential solutions? So we're looking for that whole positive nature of it. Because think about it for a second. When we talk about having a positive approach to things, it's always looking at what you can do to make that reality happen. Think about a situation you were involved with. Think of a person who was quite negative. Imagine being around that person day to day. What's that person do to you? Well, if you're like most people, what happens is that negative person brings you down. That negative person sucks the life out of you. What trailblazing leaders do is the opposite. What they do is they engage others. They empower and make people feel that they can do things they never thought they can do. And remember, as we're blazing new trails, we're going to get into situations we may have not seen before as leaders. We need people around us who know that we can help them get through that situation. That's why the power of positive language has an enormous impact. And it's important that leaders really look at that to help people along. Because the human nature says, overall, people are not going to necessarily step up to the challenge, especially if we are quite negative in our approach. I will tell you, I've been in situations where I've been called in to work with leaders who are quite negative. What happens is that negativity festers down into the team. And when that happens, results don't happen. When that happens, we usually have a revolving door attitude issues and, more importantly, morale issues. Trailblazing leaders know about that. They don't want that to happen as they're going into new paths and breaking glass ceilings in terms of how to approach things. We want people to be with us. The second part of this is really looking at the whole concept of the characteristics that we're looking at. When we talk about allurement, when we talk about the whole concept of allurement, what we're talking about is having a charming approach. Now, when we go into that approach, what we're doing is we're trying to embrace people. What we're trying to do is really help them understand that there's a way that we can do this. So being an Ellure approach really helps leaders to be very effective. So when we tie these both together, the characteristics we see is, and Producer Bill, if you could put that slide back up, what this is all about is building a captivating vision. To have a very powerful allurement means you have to build a vision that people want to strive for. We want to build something in which people can see there's a purpose to. When President Kennedy said, let's go to the moon by the end of the decade, he was building a captivating vision and asking people to come along with him on this journey. He built this vision so it's something that people can attain. Now, what's quite interesting for me is many years ago, I was asked to be the leader of an association of coaches. And I remember the first day that I became the president and I had my first board meeting, I actually went into the room in which we were renting out for that particular evening. It was our first meeting. Now, mind you, what was happening in our association is we had over 450 members, but on an average, we would bring about 20 members per meeting, which to me was unacceptable. So I remember walking up to the podium in this room, which held about 200 people. And I stood up in front of the podium with my board down below on a table. And I said, here's what I see for us this year. I see this room full of coaches. I see this room full of energy. I see this room, one in which people are engaged, is very loud and very energetic. And I believe we can make this happen. And I know we can make this happen. That was the first meeting of the year. Did you realize that at part of the year, we actually had that room filled? of over 200 coaches for a particular event. I think part of the reason was I helped build that vision. I helped the board see and show that we can make this room full of coaches. And I actually articulated not only the vision, but I also described what I saw in the room to make it a reality. So the second part of the characteristics, if you could put the slide up, Producer Bill, is that powerful articulation. I articulated that vision not only at that time, but every day that we were together as a board. I wanted them to know, I wanted them to realize, I wanted them to experience the fact that that reality can happen. I also wanted them to know that we had the power to make it happen. And every action that we did was in a very positive approach. So what I did was, in regards to the positivity, everything we did was all based on a positive approach. That even though our results at a particular meeting may have not achieved the ultimate result, I always encouraged the positive approach in what we were doing to moving our goals to reality. So it was always focusing on the positive. President Reagan and President Kennedy did the same. It was always the positive nature of moving things along. Now, and part of my research, not only has President Reagan and President Kennedy done it, but one of the persons that also did it was Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, in previous shows, we've talked a little bit about him and his leadership abilities. But he also exuded many of these. He had a captivating vision, especially when he started fighting the Nazis in Germany. He was talking about a vision of defeating them and talking about a vision of freedom. He was very articulate in his language. He was the type that would go to rooftops and watch the bombing of his country, so he could articulate that to his people. Now think about that. A person, a prominent leader going to rooftops of buildings to watch the bombing so he can articulate what actually happened. Because he felt, in order for him to communicate this, he had to see it. And he wanted to communicate it in a way and not hear it from a third person. And everything that Winston Churchill did was of a positive nature. It was what they could do as a country. So, as you can see, there has been many characteristics of trailblazing leaderships in our country. The key thing for you as a new leader is to take these characteristics, especially your language, which is part of Ellure, and really looking at it and examining it. I want you to look at it and examine it from a perspective of trailblazing leadership. I want you to look at your language and say to yourself, is my language powerful? Is my language engaging? Will people follow me? Do people follow me? Is my language positive? Do you look at the positivity of things? Are you more focused on negative? I was at an event yesterday and I was talking to several CEOs. And we were talking about this whole concept of emotional intelligence, and one of the things that came up was positive and negativity. And one of the CEOs mentioned a challenge he's having with one of his managers in his organization. And we discussed it a little bit further about what exactly is happening. This gentleman is a very negative person. He's a person that kind of looked at and sees things from a negative lens. I want you to think about that for a second. Imagine working for somebody who, that no matter what you do, no matter how well you do it, there's always a what if. Well, that's great, but what about if you did it this way? Imagine every day coming into work and dealing with that. It can be quite defeating. Imagine kind of working for somebody who's very moody. Imagine trying to work with that person, not knowing from day to day, are you getting someone who's on the top of their game or someone who's going to be very moody that day? Trailblazing leaders know that that's not the course to create outstanding results. They understand that negativity is what could kill them and kill their ability to move forward. trailblazing leaders understand being positive is vital in their language and in their modeling and what they do. Because after all, when you're blazing new trails, you're going to hit some road bumps. You're going to hit some speed bumps. You may do some things and ultimate results may not occur. But they realize that each of those are a learning experience to move forward. So I challenge you, the leaders out there today, to look at and examine your language. Are you can-do attitude or are you a can't-do attitude? Is your language positive? Is it more negative? Do you set a compelling vision that people want to follow? Or is it the same old, same old? Is your language engaging? Do you tell people, what can we do to bring things to the gold standard? What can we do to be more top-notch? What can we do to up our game? Trailblazing leaders use those powerful metaphors to really get people engaged. So, I'd leave you with the key question. All great leaders, and especially all great trailblazing leaders, have it. Do you? So, if there's anything in closing today's show, because I'm looking, it's close on time, if there's anything we can do to help you with your leadership needs, you could reach out to us at www.getyouredge.com. We're more than happy to help you with any of your leadership needs and any challenges you may face. So, I appreciate you tuning in today's show. Continue to be great trailblazing leaders, and we'll see you on our next show.